Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Monday, January 7th, 2019. On today's episode, we're going to talk about what we've been up to at the water cooler. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Managing Editor Jacob Paul.
Hello, hello.
Weekend Editor Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
Senior Writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
And writers Hoai-Tran.
Hey, everyone.
And Chris Evangelista.
Hello.
So we haven't recorded one of these in almost 2 weeks now, so we have a lot to talk about as we were on break and probably saw and did a bunch of things. But before we get to that, we usually end up talking about the Golden Globe winners and losers. We have so much going on this week on the podcast. We have so many great podcasts in the works that we just don't have time for a news episode. So I thought I would throw that into the water cooler here before we get started pretty quickly. I was one of the few people on the staff that watched the Golden Globes. I didn't get to see the opening, so I didn't get to see any like the monologue and jokes kind of thing. I am happy that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse won Best Animated, and maybe that is a good sign for the Oscars. I'm happy Christian Bale won for his transformative appearance in Vice, and thanking Satan for inspiration was, I think, hilarious. Roma won Best Foreign Film, and Alfonso won Best Director. I think we can all be on board for those. Rami Malek won Best Actor for Bohemian Rhapsody. I know a lot of people were, on Twitter at least, were kind of making fun of that when it happened, and then moments later, Bohemian Rhapsody won for Best Picture of the Year Dramatic. I actually like Rami Malek's performance in that movie. I don't think the movie is worthy of even being nominated for Best Picture, but I don't know. I can kind of get behind the best actor performance. What do you guys? What were your thoughts on the Golden Globes?
They're irrelevant. They stink. We should stop watching them, stop covering them, and stop caring. That's what we should do, Peter.
Okay, Jacob, you did not watch them. You were trying to sleep. Let's talk to someone who watched them. Ben, you covered it for the site.
I did, and I actually kind of share Jacob's thoughts about the whole thing because, the thing about the Golden Globes that I just want to present for people who may not be aware is that all of these winners are voted on by less than 100 people, and they're not even it's the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. So, it's
actually 90 film critics, international film critics. It doesn't include anybody from the United States. I think it includes some people from Canada. If we put the list of these people in the show notes, I don't think anybody would in the United States would recognize one of these names. I mean, that's probably unfair to say, though, right? Because they're probably writing in different languages.
It's just that for me, it's just about, this is being voted on by a small group of international journalists, and it's sort of treated almost on the same level as the Oscars, which is voted on by, thousands and thousands of actual craftsmen and the peers of the people who are winning these awards. So, as long as everybody who's listening knows that and sort of understands what they're getting into with the Golden Globes and doesn't take it too seriously, I think it's fine for the providing a platform for people to deliver heartfelt speeches. Regina King gave, I think, maybe the night's best speech when she was talking about gender parity and all of that. So, I mean, like I said, it's a great place.
And I know you're saying you're allowing our readers to read between the lines of why it's a big difference. Can you explain why it is a big difference of these 90 people? What could be potentially disastrous about only allowing, an award show that is voted on by 90 people?
Well, okay, so one of the big dings always against the Golden Globes is that the Hollywood Foreign Press Association is sort of notorious for loving to take selfies with famous people and hang out with famous people. So that sort of tinges a lot of their nominations. They'll nominate certain movies, especially in certain categories, to basically get as many famous people in the room with them as possible. So that's one whole thing. The thing that I'm sort of getting at is that, a lot of times in these acceptance speeches, these actors and directors and stuff will go up and thank everyone in the crowd. And at the Oscars, that actually makes sense because the people that they're thanking are the people who are in that room for the most part and people who have actually voted and awarded them that prize, right? But at the Golden Globes, you're thanking, again, a group of 90 total people, and you're just, I don't know, it just, I guess what bothers me is that it is sort of, culturally, it's treated with a level of, it's treated as being on the same plane as the Oscars, and I just want everybody to know that it's absolutely not. But again, there's the whole other side of it, of glamour and pageantry, and like the whole fun of seeing people like Andy Samberg and Sandra Oh, make jokes and hang out, and famous people dressed up and all of that stuff. And that, I don't want to take anything away from that, but just in terms of like the credibility of the award ceremony, I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page there.
Oh, for sure. Can we talk about Green Book winning Best Comedy / Musical?
What the hell?
Yeah. What is going on there? It's also funny how neither the producer or Rami Malek mentioned the film's director in their thank you speeches.
Yeah, that's. Yeah. I mean, there's like a whole thing where that seems to be, Green Book seems to be moving right along through all of this award season stuff without being dragged down by association with Bryan Singer, and that's a very problematic thing for for a lot of people. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if the Oscars, the voting body is going to overlook some of that stuff like everybody else seems to be doing, or if they're going to draw the line somewhere.
HT, I know you didn't watch the Golden Globes, but you were following along on Twitter as you were rewatching Spider-Verse, which we'll talk about later. What did you think?
I think that I'm honestly not surprised by these choices because, yes, the Hollywood Foreign Press tends to go with movies that are celebrity-driven and that have a popular following. And I will say Bohemian Rhapsody has a hugely popular following. I remember during Christmas, all my relatives kept asking me, have you seen Bohemian Rhapsody? It's a great movie. And I'm like, oh, yeah, sure. So, but also I think
I know we shouldn't go by box office, but Bohemian Rhapsody has done insane business internationally, which, these film critics are from international water. So, what else did you have to say?
Yeah, no, it's huge internationally, but it's also kind of funny to me that, we talked about how the Golden Globes tends to award star power, and yet A Star is Born, which had arguably more star power than Green Book, for example, didn't really get any awards either, which I thought was very strange because that felt like a film that was sort of tailor-made for this kind of awards voting body.
Yeah. I just find it funny that, I feel like film critics should be the biggest supporter of the Golden Globes because it's an award show that is voted on by film critics. And if you look at Twitter on a night when the Golden Globes are happening, or, when nominations hit or anything, the most critical of the Golden Globes are film critics. Like, we can't even embrace an award show by film critics for,
Yeah, but they're hacks. Like, we're not supposed to like.
Remember when they nominated The Tourist?
Yeah. These are the film critics that give film critics a bad name. Like, these are the people who are literally being bought for their opinion. This is the type of thing that, crazy DCEU fans accuse us of doing, when it's really, these are the critics who are doing that sort of thing. They're glad-handing until you buy their vote. And so, to hell with them.
Hey, Peter, it looks like I'm right. Sorry.
No. I'm in 100% agreement with you. I wish the Golden Globes would fall into the abyss at this point.
Honestly, I only really enjoy watching the Golden Globes for the drunken shenanigans that happen on this show, because it's the one show that allow basically an open bar, whereas the Oscars, they have to stay in their seats and they can't eat. But the Golden Globes is all about that intermingling, and I always find that part fun. The awards themselves are kind of secondary to me.
If you go back to the very first Oscars in the 1920s, the award winners were announced in advance. Then over the course of 20 minutes, everybody stood up and got their trophies, and then everybody danced for 2 hours, and that was it. I say we go back to that. Eliminate all of our award shows, announce the Oscars in advance, let them dance, and nothing else. No other award shows.
I know you did not intend for this, Jacob, but this is a good segue to jump into the water cooler. because what I've been doing this week is last week I went to the Roosevelt Hotel, which is the place where the first Oscars were held, to attend the magic show at the Roosevelt starring Justin Willman. Kitra got me tickets to this for Christmas. Justin Willman, you might know as, he used to be the host of Cupcake Wars, but he is a accomplished magician. He has a hit Netflix series called Magic for Humans, which had a few clips that went viral, and there's a season 2 coming. He has a residency at the Roosevelt. It's produced by Theory 11, who also produces a show called The Magician in New York City, which is also fantastic. This is a premium, date night experience. It's a fantastic show. Justin is just so funny, so charming. I feel like on his TV show, he comes off a little more Weasley, and you can kind of be annoyed by him. In this show, he's just so fantastic. It's such a small space, so it's kind of like this intimate venue. You walk through a fake bookshelf to get in there, so it's kind of like the Magic Castle in that sense. And I'm trying to think of what probably the best trick he did. I don't want to spoil this whole show for you, but the best trick he did, I think, was something he started off the show with. He took someone's phone from the audience, their iPhone, and had people examine a glass bottle, and he somehow put their phone in the glass bottle. And he kept the glass bottle on stage for the entire show in intermission. On the intermission, there was like a chalkboard, and he wrote the guy's phone number on the chalkboard, and all through intermission, the people in attendance could send text messages to the poor guy who, lost his phone in the bottle. But I would highly recommend the show. It is kind of expensive. It's kind of pricey, and especially after, you have drinks and all that stuff. And, but it's such an elegant venue. It's such a fun, magical night, and I highly recommend it. On this podcast, everybody here knows I am a member of the Magic Castle. I go to the Magic Castle every week. I don't talk about that every week on the water cooler because I know not everybody listening to this wants to hear about magic. But I'm sorry, guys. This time I have 2 magical things to talk about. The second of which is I saw this close-up magic show from a guy named Mike Elizalde. How do you pronounce this last name? I don't even know how to pronounce his last name. Jacob, can you help me with this?
Elizalde?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I feel really bad. I could not find a pronunciation online. Okay, so this guy is not a magician. He is the guy that started Spectral Motion, which is the visual effects company that has provided the visual effects for, Guillermo del Toro's stuff like Hellboy and Pacific Rim. They do practical monster effects. Like they created the Demogorgon in Stranger Things. So this guy has been a big guy in Hollywood, and for the last 12 years he's been a magician member at the Magic Castle, but he's never performed publicly as a magician. It's kind of like just his hobby, his side thing. This week at the Magic Castle, this past week at the Magic Castle, he had his first full week of shows, like performing for a public audience, and it was in the close-up gallery at the Magic Castle. And it's really hard to describe what this was, but if you can imagine, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. It was like if Guillermo del Toro directed a close-up magic show with incredible Hollywood practical effects, but the power of stories, magic, monsters, and horror films. That was it. I wish, Jacob and Chris, I wish you could have seen the show because it was fantastic. It was Lovecraft inspired. There was literally practical moving monsters on a table in front of me in the close-up room. It was probably the biggest show I've seen in this small venue, and I'm sure he'll come back to perform in the future at the Magic Castle. If you ever have the chance to see Mike perform, it was so inspiring. and so magical. I ended up seeing it 3 times. I saw it. I had to keep on bringing friends to see it because I just loved it so much. But that's what I've been up to. Jacob, what have you been doing?
I did doing 2 things that kind of go hand in hand. First of all, after years of putting it off, I finally joined Instagram, and I'm doing it for a reason. And the reason is that after literally dying my entire life,
everybody's leaving Facebook right now, Jacob. You're on the reverse trend here.
I'm leaving. What do you mean? Like I'm leaving? I'm not leaving Facebook quite yet, but I'm definitely joining Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah, but Instagram's owned by Facebook.
Yeah. Whatever. Anyway, the reason I'm doing it is I want a public place where I can be properly motivated and properly shamed for the new diet I'm going on. I'm not going to explain the details of the diet. I'm not going to be the kind of person who opens myself up to being told what I should and shouldn't do. I know it works for me. I just got to stick to it. But I realize that if I have a public place like this podcast where I can say, hey, this week I kept on doing it, or this week I didn't. Here's a photograph of a week later, a week after that, etc. If that stops happening, then everyone who listens to this, everybody who follows me on social media will suddenly know, oh, Jacob screwed up. And I'm hoping that kind of shame will finally be what I need to finally get a lifestyle change going, because my entire life's been ups and downs of diet for 6 months very successfully, and screw it all up. Diet for 6 months very successfully, screw it all up. Gain all the weight back, lose it all back, gain it all back, lose it all back. It's just been an up and down roller coaster of like physical nightmares. And so I'm going to use social media shame to try to keep me in line. So if you follow me on Instagram, where I'm Jacob Samuel Hall, all one word, you don't see like a weekly update starting very soon. You can start saying, hey Jacob, well, are you still fat? Are you still fat, Jacob? Please, and I will welcome this. And then and if I fail, I fail. But I'll fail publicly instead of privately. So that's my goal, is to succeed in public so I won't fail privately.
Have you, I have a similar problem, Jacob, as you know, we've talked about this. Have you, I forget the name of the website. There's like a website where you can actually bet on yourself losing weight. Have you heard about that?
No, I have not.
Where I think you like put money up and you try to like put a goal for like that year. And if you don't reach the goal by the end of that year, you lose the money to a charity. But if you do,
very interesting.
Yeah, I forget the name of the website. I'll look it up and put it in the show notes if I can find it. But I mean, that would be privately, right? Like you want publicly, you want to be shamed.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, everybody can look at Jacob's Instagram. What is your Instagram name?
Jacob Samuel Hall, since Jacob S. Hall is already taken.
Okay, let's move on to Chris. I saw that on Instagram. Speaking of Instagram, I saw that you built yourself a shelf to house your Blu-ray collection that looks like bigger than your wall.
Yes. Yeah. So I have a very large collection of Blu-rays and DVDs. I don't really even know the exact count. I'm probably going to try and do a count as I'm going through this project. But I was running out of space for them. They were just piling up everywhere. And I don't know if folks out there know this, but shelving is ridiculously expensive. Like just to get one shelf to hold, not even all the movies, maybe like half of them would run me like close to $100. And I was not, about to drop, several $100s on shelving. So, I Googled cheap shelving and a video came up with some guy building this sort of it looks kind of like a giant pallet, a giant wooden pallet. And it looked very easy. And I am not handy at all. I'm very bad at doing anything involving tools and labor. And I just stink at it. I never learned, and I suck at it. But it looked really easy. So much so that even I could do it, or so I thought. And it turned out to be very difficult. It took like 4 hours to put it all together, but I finally did. And I haven't put the movies on the shelf yet. I'm going to alphabetize them and slowly do that. And I'm really hoping there's enough room, because if there's not, I'm probably going to need to have an intervention, because this thing it's 7 feet tall, it's 6 feet wide, and if that can't hold all my movies, I have a problem.
The real problem with Blu-ray and DVD shelves are that, like, a lot of the stuff you buy, like if you go to IKEA to find a shelf, like, you know, it's not built for Blu-rays, so like the shelves, like, there's some, you know, some room in between. So if you want to maximize how many Blu-rays you fit on a wall, you know, you want to have the shelves like exactly right, because that means you could fit more Blu-rays. So I'm assuming the shelf is like the exact amount between Blu-rays or something?
Yeah. I measured it for DVDs because I have those too, and DVDs are taller. But yeah, so everything should fit perfectly in theory. We'll see.
Okay, I
was curious about the shelf because do you have any like oversized Blu-ray titles that like fit awkwardly on that kind of shelf?
You mean like big box sets or something like that? Or?
Yeah, like the I don't know, like
the Dark Knight that comes in a bat pod.
No, I don't have anything that's like shaped like anything. I do have the Dark Knight trilogy in like this rectangular. It's like almost the size of a shoebox, but I don't even like bother putting that on the shelf. I just have that somewhere else.
I was thinking more of like the Harry Potter Blu-ray collectors editions that are like each in like they're like in a box that is like not quite as tall as the book, but about as wide as the books.
No, I intentionally avoid getting stuff like that because it drives me nuts. Like I want it to look like aesthetically pleasing. I hate when I have something on the shelf that sticks out like a sore thumb like that. So I tend to avoid buying those things.
Gotcha. Yeah, that was because I was looking at that and I thought that it might be a good solution for me too, because I'm kind of in the same boat as you are, where I have a ton of physical movies and the shelving it's a little too expensive for my taste, but I don't know if that'll work for my purposes or not.
Yeah, I should add that I put this whole thing together for $40. This is $40 of wood compared to hundreds of dollars on a shelf. So that alone is what inspired me to do it.
How are the 2x4s attached to the wall?
I just have L brackets, so they're just L brackets mounted to the wall, and then there's slats across the 2x4s with just ordinary screws.
Gotcha. Okay.
Chris, I'm really disappointed that you don't own the Amazing Spider-Man 2 that comes in the bust of Jamie Foxx's face. Yes.
If someone like sent that to me for free, I would make an exception for the Jamie Foxx shocker head, whatever whatever his name is. But no, I don't have that.
You know, when I was younger and first collecting DVDs, I used to love those gimmicky DVD, like, you'd buy like Terminator 2 and it would come in like, the head of the endoskeleton and stuff like that. And now as an adult, I hate, first of all this stuff is just like cheap plastic and doesn't fit anywhere. But like, I have a huge board game collection like Jacob does, and I won't buy board games that come in like, tins, or like one of my favorite games of all time is Pandemic, and they just came out with a 10th anniversary edition of Pandemic that comes in like this briefcase that looks like it's like a first aid kit. And because it like doesn't say the name of the game on the side and it's awkward shaped, I'm not going to buy it because, do you have this problem at all, Jacob?
I do. Certain companies insist on putting the games out in tin, and that, Pandemic box you're speaking of was tempting for a hot second until I realized that storing it would be a nightmare. But yeah, it's like, as people who follow my Twitter know, my house is a labyrinth of shelves, all full of things, and where there aren't shelves, there are stacks. So I just learned how to store things. I learned how to stack things. But even I had to say no to the Pandemic 10-year anniversary edition because there was just no way that thing could be remotely displayed in a way that would satisfy me.
And speaking of shelves, I've heard that Ben has been spending his time reorganizing his bookshelves.
And yeah, to keep the home storage conversation alive for a little while longer. Yeah, my wife and I, we took down all of our Christmas decorations over the past few days, and we've been buying a ton of books over the past, couple years, I think, and just acquired so many that we no longer have any room on any of our shelves. So we went through and, found a couple things to move around. We actually went to IKEA and bought a bookshelf. So I'm I feel like like Garth and Wayne like bowing down like we're not worthy to Chris, who actually built his own. But I just took the easy way out and went to IKEA and built my own in like whatever 30 minutes or however long it takes
what kind of IKEA shelf did you get? Do you know the name of it?
I think it's called Billy, actually.
Oh yeah, the Billy bookcase, they're the best ones. They my house has at least 15, 20 of those, Ben.
Yeah. So, we just got one, and my wife and I took it upon ourselves to, use that as an excuse to basically just take stock of every book that we own and, organize it like library style. Like, here are the classics. Here are, art of movie related books. Here are, biographies and all of that kind of stuff. So, it was, it's a lot of work, but it's fun. And I don't have nearly the massive collection that like somebody like Jacob has. So, it didn't take nearly as long as I would imagine. If Jacob did something like that, I feel like you would be out of commission for like, weeks on end. But, it just took us a couple days. So yeah, that's taken up a lot of my time. But yeah, it's been fun, just sort of hanging out with my wife and reorganizing stuff. And now everything looks really nice. And yeah, I guess maybe if we end up with a full shelf's worth of books, of new books, maybe I'll go the Chris route and build my own next time.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, my next step, Ben, is I'm going to look into buying some software or building a spreadsheet of some kind where I can categorize everything, because we reach a point now where it's like, okay, it's not which shelf is my book on, it's in which room. So I want to get a spreadsheet. It's like, oh, this book is located on this shelf in the guest bedroom, or on this shelf in the dining room, or it's in this bathroom. So I need to form a database to help me get around my own home library at this point.
Yeah, I feel like you need a GPS system. Like, you look down at a device and it beeps with a like an arrow in a certain direction and tells you to go upstairs and turn right, and there it is.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because that was what I was going to ask. I was going to ask if you had an app that like tracked all of your books. I know at one point I owned almost 3,000 DVDs, and now I don't own almost any Blu-rays. I own a drawer of Blu-rays. Chris, you own so many movies. Do you have an app that like tracks like how many or what you have? Because there was times I would go to Best Buy and buy something and come home and realize I already owned that movie.
When I first started collecting things, this was back in the VHS days, I did keep like a list, primarily because I used to be the guy everyone borrowed things for because I owned everything, and people would borrow stuff from me and I would forget they have it, so I did it to keep track of that. But as I've gotten older and lazier, I sort of fell out of the habit. But I was actually thinking of starting again with this project I'm undertaking, but I'm also still lazy, so I might not do that.
Okay, let's move on to HT. What have you been up to? Have you been organizing your bookshelf?
I did no such home improvement, but I did have some people stay at my home in New York. My little sister came to visit me for New Year's Eve, and she stayed for the weekend. And while that sounds like it's a fun party and the wild time, it was not, in fact, because if you remember, New Year's Eve was quite miserable, at least on the East Coast. There was just a downpour of rain, and it was not a great time to be out. So my roommate and I just had people over at our place, where the extent of what we did was just like have a power hour to an early 2000s playlist and watch the original pilot for the original Glow. So the actual 80s Glow.
Yeah, not the show that's on Netflix, but the actual pilot for the show that the show on Netflix is about.
Yes, exactly. It was fascinating.
Is it as bad as it looks?
It was quite gripping in some parts, and it was bad. The wrestling improved in like the second episode, I hear, but they had actually a good story. Like, they had one about a Russian, I can't remember her name, a Russian wrestler who was fighting this one woman who was like acting like a baby the entire time, and she was really into it. She had like the baby voice and everything, and like the curls, and also her brother was paraplegic, and he showed up at the match, and she was inspired to beat the Russian lady. It was quite an experience to watch.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I actually recommend, if you like Glow, I recommend you checking out the original pilot for Glow because it's fascinating. So, there's a rap too. They do a rap at one point at the closing credits.
Have you watched the documentary about Glow that I guess the series is actually kind of spawned off of?
I've not watched the documentary, no.
I think it might be on Netflix. Yeah, I would assume. Synergy, right? Probably.
Yes, Synergy.
What else were you doing?
I set up my PS4 that I got for Christmas, and I did not play the Spider-Man game that it came along with, but I did pop in before sunset to just test it out, and that was my first, not my first watch of 2019, but definitely my first indulgence of 2019, just rewatching this movie that I rewatched way too many times.
Okay, let's move on. Before we get to what we've been watching, let's talk about what we've been reading. I will start off with a couple books that I got for Christmas. I'll start with David Chen got me the Taschen, the big epic Star Wars archives book. This book is, when you open the book, it's, I don't know, probably 4 feet long. It's one of those huge coffee table books. It's over 300 pages. I have all the Rinsler making of Star Wars books, and those to me are some of the best books on the making of movies. And I have tons of Star Wars books actually, and it's not like this book provides you with that much more new photos of that you haven't seen from behind the scenes. It's probably kind of more of a best of that kind of stuff. I have the huge Ralph McQuarrie concept art book, which is fantastic, but this provides the concept art in a size that is on, next to having it on a poster on your wall. These are huge, and you just get to admire and look at them. And the author spent, I think, 3 days talking to George Lucas for this book. So this book chronicles the original trilogy of Star Wars up through the Ewok movies and the holiday special and all that kind of stuff. So you actually get George Lucas talking about the holiday special, one of the only times you'll actually get to read him talking about that. But the book is just a best of everything. So if you don't have any of those books, this book is amazing. I think it might be very expensive. I think it's $150 or $200. But if you have a Star Wars fan or are a Star Wars fan, I would say this is a must own. That I'm having a hard time even getting through it. I'm just on A New Hope right now because every page is filled with fantastic photographs, illustrations, text. I'm reading right now. I just read, and he interviews everybody. So it's kind of like what do you call that? A written history or a
oral history? Oral history,
yeah, oral history of what happened. So there's even a quote from George Lucas's lawyer and talking about how they, went and talked to Fox. They had 20 something meetings with Fox, going over the rights and how they ended up, getting the merchandising rights for the Star Wars out of the deal. So it's just, they also have clips in there, from the set. So you get to visit the set during the production, basically be an eye on the wall, during say, Empire Strikes Back, when they're coming to the line, the infamous line of "I love you, I know," and the director's talking to Harrison Ford about, I think he tells him you should tell him, "Leia, I'll be back, I promise," and Harrison Ford just comes up with the "I love you, I know" thing, and it's cool to read it and feel like you are a just on the wall of the making of that history. It's such a great book. Chris, I think you would actually love it. It's fantastic. I was hesitant to buy it. I talked about it in our Slack channel because I wasn't sure it was going to provide anything more than those making of books, and David Chen saw that and bought it for me for Christmas. So I need to thank him because this is such a great present. And the other book I've been reading is The Art of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And, this is one of those typical art of books. I own a lot of them for Pixar movies. I own some of them for Marvel movies. And if you haven't ever thumbed through one of these books, they're just filled with awesome concept art and interviews with the creative teams involved. And this one, I think I don't think they were expecting that many people to want to buy this book because it's sold out everywhere, and somehow Kitra got her hands on this, and it's just, I mean, if you love the art from that movie, which I don't know how you couldn't, this book is just so enjoyable, and I haven't had much time to get all the way through it, but I've just been enjoying the images and, paging through them. Jacob, what have you been reading?
Well, since I last spoke about it, I finished reading Blake Harris's Console Wars, which is set to be adapted into a TV miniseries by Jordan Vogt-Roberts. And once again, this is written by someone who contributes to Slash Film on occasion, Blake Harris, who I've edited. I don't know him in real life, but just disclosure. But if I didn't like the book, I just wouldn't say anything. I liked it a lot. So I'm going to spend a moment to say that. This book, which is about the corporate rivalry between Sega and Nintendo in the 90s, is absolutely fascinating. And in so many ways, the birth of modern consumer culture, the things we expect from a shopping experience, from a corporation, from a product or a brand loyalty, it all sort of gets born here, either intentionally or unintentionally. So even if you're not a video game fan, it feels like it's a vital look into this changing moment where what people wanted out of companies changed, and what we wanted out of being fans of companies changed. And I know some people I've heard have issues with how Harris structures the dialogue of the book, which is that he recreates and condenses lots of scenes so that they play out as like dialogue-driven scenes, like a novel, as opposed to a step back for a nonfiction historical approach. And I personally really enjoyed this. It lends the entire book this incredible immediacy. It reads more like a screenplay than it does a book at times. You can really picture the movie in your head as you're reading it. And I had a really great time with the book. It's a very long book. It was 500, 600 pages long, and I had such a blast reading it. And I wish it was longer, honestly. It ends very shortly after the Sega Saturn disaster. And there's a few more years left of what I wish I could have followed it. I had to Wikipedia all the main subjects to learn what happened next because I wanted to learn more. So it's a very good book, and I recommend reading it before the series comes out. And
I love the style that you're talking about. He writes it almost as if it is a movie. So it's going to be fantastic to see that, I guess, TV adaptation of it. And his next book, I think it's coming out sometime this year. It's called The History of the Future. And it's about Oculus, Facebook, and, VR. And it kind of follows Palmer Luckey. I don't think there's much out about it now. You can pre-order it on Amazon. But from what I can tell, it seems like it might be kind of like, the spiritual, not connected, but spiritual sequel to like The Social Network, that kind of book.
Yeah, I don't want to say too much, but let's just say someone sent me the first chapter of the new book.
Me too. I didn't want to say that, Jacob.
It is. If you liked Console Wars, it is exceptionally good. It is very much the same style, but whereas Console Wars follows main characters who are so good and pure, they might as well all be played by James Stewart because they're all trying their best and they're all noble underdogs. This new book is dealing with some people who are really not as easy to like. So I'm very, very curious to see how this very approachable, you're in the room style goes when you're around people who you don't want to be around, as opposed to people you're rooting on all the time. So I'm very curious to see how that plays out.
Yes. What else have you been reading?
I just finished The Devil and Sherlock Holmes by David Grann. David Grann is a journalist. He's written for The New Yorker, The Atlantic. He wrote The Lost City of Z, which became a movie a few years ago. He wrote an article first that became a nonfiction longer version, and he recently also wrote I think it's a Killer of the Flower Moon. Is that what it's called? It's a movie that Martin Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio bought the rights to make hopefully in the near future. So he's having his work's being adapted to a lot of movies, and this book, Devil and Sherlock Holmes, is a collection of essays and articles he wrote between the years 2000 and 2009. And a lot of them are crime stories. A lot of them are like stories of obsessive people. Some are mysteries. And interestingly, a lot of them are adapted into movies. Like one story is being filmed into a movie right now, starring Laura Dern, about an arson case in Texas that goes wrong. The story True Crime, which is an incredible like whodunit serial killer story was made into a terrible movie starring Jim Carrey called Dark Crimes. This story, City of Water, about the tunnels underneath New York City that supply the water supply, is being made into a movie for Paramount right now. The Old Man, the Gun was adapted into a Rob Redford movie last year. Is a story in here that is the basis for the documentary The Imposter. So there's just all these really, really incredible stories. He's an incredible writer. Like, he just writes in a style that's just absolutely gripping from the moment you start reading. It's incredibly detailed without getting bogged down, incredibly cinematic without being, feeling like it's begging to be written to a movie. It is just nonstop, like, fascinating stories. Like, I would have to put the book down frequently and turn to whoever I was with and start explaining to them what I was reading, because I had to share what I was learning about all these subjects, all these crazy stories. And I'm looking forward to reading his other books. I mean, I've read The Lost City of Z, but his new book, which I'm looking at the proper title right now, is Killers of the Flower Moon, The Osage Murders and the Birth of the FBI. It was published in 2017. It's being made into a movie by Scorsese and DiCaprio at some point if they get around to it. So
they're making everything, like, so that might not even happen.
Maybe, but David Grant, his stuff is being adapted constantly, and I was shocked to realize that, like, so many of his articles, not just his full books, but his articles have been optioned and made into movies. So this book is incredibly entertaining and, educational as it is, but also if you're the kind of person who, like, wants to be on top of true stories that may become movies very soon, maybe pick this one up.
Very cool. And each day, while you haven't been rearranging your bookshelves, you have been doing some reading, right?
I have. Guess I'm getting on my New Year's resolutions early. I've been reading Hunger by Roxane Gay. It's a book I bought around midway last year, never really got around to it. And it's a memoir by Roxane Gay about how she turned to food and weight gain in the wake of this harrowing sexual assault that she experienced as a young girl. And it's a really well-written, really dark, and really affecting memoir that is gets into her self sort of disgust and her relationships with her friends and family, and her own narrative as she kind of wrangles with her weight and her trauma. So it's really good. I'm only halfway through it now. It's a bit hard to read, and I have been reading it right before bed too, so it's not like a light reading kind of thing, but it's a really great memoir, and I highly recommend it if you guys want to check it out.
And that is Hunger by Roxane Gay. Let's move on to what we've been watching. I finally saw If Beale Street Could Talk. I know this is on many of your top 10 lists. I was excited to finally see this. I don't think this is going to make my top 10 films of the year, but I did really like it a lot. He's so fantastic at capturing these authentic, like, honest, intimate moments. There's so much beautiful cinematography from James Laxton in this, and I feel like if this was another year that Roma didn't come out, that this would be, the clear winner for cinematography in my mind. There's, moving performance by Regina King. The score is incredible. It's a touching story with a terribly sad gut punch of social commentary. But I guess for me, it feels more like a mood piece. It's slow and poetic. The pace of the film kind of prevents me from entirely loving it. But I did really enjoy it. I know a bunch of you did also see it this week. Jacob, you saw it, right?
Yes, it made my top 10 of the year. It was number 8 on the list that's published at slashfilm.com. And if you listened to our podcast, part 1 of our 50 Greatest Moments podcast earlier this week, you heard me talk a little bit about Barry Jenkins and why I think he's special as a filmmaker, and how he manages to find so much empathy in all of his characters, and how he manages to create male characters who are masculine without being toxic, which is extremely hard to do and extremely hard to make that feel real, and
especially nowadays.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the idea of how should I act as a man? I feel like Barry Jenkins has an answer for me. I feel like I want to watch If Beale Street Could Talk to learn the do's and the don'ts of how I can be a better person and a better man to the other men and the women in my life. I feel like Barry Jenkins is a very wise storyteller. He's a very He's wise beyond his years. He's not. You know, I look forward to like the next 30 years of his movies because I feel like he's only going to have more lessons for me to absorb and learn, and more ways for him to emotionally wreck me. I think this is an amazing movie.
Yeah, Brad, you also saw this film.
I did. This actually ended up topping my top 10 list. It's my number one movie of the year. I absolutely fell in love with this movie. I was just so caught up in the intimacy and the passion of it all. It's simultaneously full of hope, but also such a harrowing movie. There's so much love in every frame. Nicholas Bertel's score just like seeps through every scene, and it makes you feel even more of that passion that Barry Jenkins has put in here. The performances from Stephen James and Kiki Lane are absolutely astounding. Even the supporting performances, you know, Regina King, who just won a Golden Globe for it. Everybody in this movie is fantastic. I just loved every bit of it. And I was kind of surprised that, Peter, you said that you felt this was more of a mood piece than Roma, and I actually feel like the opposite because I love Roma too. It was actually my number 2.
Well, I wasn't comparing it to Roma. I was just saying.
But I think that I feel like Roma is more of that kind of movie that you described than If Beale Street Could Talk is. But I still loved Roma. But there's just something about Beale Street that just felt so much more. I don't know. I just connected to it, and I felt so much more while I was watching it than I did Alfonso's movie. And not that I wasn't totally moved by Alfonso's movie, but Beale Street just overwhelmed me with emotion. It's so good.
Well, that said, I haven't published my top 10 of the year, but I will say if Roma is in my top 10, it's not in the top half of the top 10. So I'll give you that little tease of that. What else did I watch this week? I watched... Well, actually, I watched this 2 weeks ago, but we haven't talked in such a long time, guys. I watched a Showtime limited series called Escape at Dannemora, and I mentioned this in our Slack channel, and I think almost everybody on this podcast was like, what is that? I've never heard of that before. Last night at the Golden Globes, Patricia Arquette won for a performance in that series, and it's well deserving because I think honestly her performance is probably in that miniseries is probably the best performance I've seen in all of visual media this past year. This is a show I didn't even hear about. This is one of those ones that came about because I saw it ranking highly on most people's best TV of the year lists, and I was like, what is this? It's on Showtime. It's directed by Ben Stiller. So every episode is directed by Ben Stiller. I think there's like 7 episodes. This is one of those miniseries that's like a 7-hour-long movie. And it really feels like a movie more so than I think most limited series. This is, I know there's probably other shows that do this, but this is the first that I noticed that it was shot and presented in 2.35 widescrreen. So like the widescreen that you see in, you know, big movies, and while most TV is shot for like 16:9 or 1:8:5, so it really had a more cinematic feel to it. It really like has these wide shots that kind of bring back the feel and framing of like 70s movies. Ben Stiller is a great director, and this show, for those who don't know, it is based on a true story a few years ago of 2 inmates who attempt to escape from a prison in upstate New York, and they are played by Benicio del Toro and Paul
Dano.
Paul Dano, yes, Paul Dano, who both have great performances. This story kind of has shades of Fargo. Patricia Arquette is someone who works at the prison who kind of gets sucked into this plot in a way, and this was created by Brett Johnson, a staff writer from Mad Men, and Michael Tolkien, who wrote The Player and Deep Impact. It's just incredible cast, great performances, great moody long shots. It's I don't know. I would highly recommend it. This was one of my favorite things I've seen this year. I know it's not a movie, but it really feels like a movie, and I would highly recommend adding this to your watch queue. Escape from Dannemora. It's really one of the best things that came out this year. And also, since I've kind of done a lot of my catch up on movies for the end of the year, I've started moving on to TV, like with Escape at Dannemora. Actually, it's called Escape at Dannemora. I've also watched the first couple episodes for the TV show Counterpart, and this is a show on Starz, so probably no one's heard of the show because no one watches Starz, but it's really, really good. It's J.K. Simmons, who exists in this world where we have found a hole to another alternate version of our world, and J.K. Simmons is playing two different versions of the same character, one from our side and one from the other side. The other side is a little different than our side, and we kind of it's kind of like a spy story. We kind of use information, we trade information with the other side to kind of, because some things are the same, and it's probably the closest thing I've found to kind of a Lost-like show since Lost. Not that it is Lost, and it's definitely not like those bad Lost copycats that came out after Lost. I love the concept. It's compelling. I'm going to keep on watching, but I've only seen the first 3 episodes. And has anybody else here seen Counterpart? Sounds like that's a no.
No, I've been wanting to watch it so much, Peter. It's just so up my alley. But then my Starz subscription suddenly canceled itself, and my attempts to resubscribe have been like, give me errors. So sorry, Starz, can't watch a show, can't give me my money.
There, if you go through Amazon, you could subscribe for a 1 week free trial. So that might be a way for you to do it and watch it on Amazon Prime through whatever device you watch it. That's what I'm doing. But J.K. Simmons is just so great in this, and I recommend this, but I would definitely recommend Escape at Dannemora. That is probably going, I think, Chris, I think you'd love that show, and Jacob, I also think you'd love that show. So I highly recommend it to you guys. Chris, what have you been watching?
I've been slacking on my movies of 2019. It's 7 days in, and I've only seen one movie, and that was Escape Room, which I'm not going to talk about. But instead, my wife and I have been watching Tidying Up with Marie Kondo, which is on Netflix. And it is adorable. It's a wonderful, feel-good show about this charming woman who comes to people's houses and tells them how to clean up because their houses are just littered with garbage. And I can really relate to that because our house is constantly a dump. Actually, just like Ben, over the weekend, my wife and I did a massive house cleaning. We took down the tree and we tore things apart. And part of that was actually inspired by this show. Just the idea of like, Jesus Christ, we really need to clean up because we're living like slobs. And I'm sure in like 3 weeks, the house will be a dump again. But for now, it's pretty clean.
So was this whole book, the DVD shelf, inspired by this?
No, I had the plan to do it before the show, but I guess the reason I finally got around and finally did it was part of, the big cleanup.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, there was a controversy on Twitter over the weekend. Because apparently, at some point, she recommends people get rid of their books, and people got really mad about this on Twitter. Was that overblown?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like she's like, burn these books. It's more that she's saying, if whatever books you feel like you're never going to read again, why not just donate them to someone else? She's not saying like, take your books and throw them in the garbage. She's saying, give them away to someone else who might read them. And I can understand that. I personally don't think I would ever want to get rid of my books. I understand, that knee-jerk reaction. But I do think, as is usually the case, people online were being a little too overreactionary.
I mean, but that makes sense. That advice makes sense. If you don't think you're ever going to pick up that book again, why have it on your wall? Just for like decoration?
I don't know. It's a weird thing. Books are like, because I don't have this problem with movies. Even though I have a lot of movies, I don't have a problem giving away or, selling a movie. But for some reason, there's like something about a book where it's like, I don't know. It feels more personal, I guess, because you hold it in your hand, and I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. There's no logic behind it, but I understand where people are coming from.
Yeah. The books I've read is a history of me in a lot of ways, so that's why I take it very personally when I was incorrectly informed about the extent of her book advice. So.
Well, her advice for all things like clutter-wise is just to keep things that spark joy in you. So if they're something that have sentimental value to you, then like you will keep it. And a lot of my books, and definitely I know a lot of people who love books, will want to keep basically all of them. She's not telling you to throw them away no matter what. It's just whatever matters personally to you.
And you also saw the show. Right?
Yeah, I was watching it because Netflix very wisely released this on New Year's Day, which seemed like a very smart marketing move on their part because everyone's going to be looking for their New Year's resolutions as well as being hungover. So I was watching this, and it's very just a calming, sweet show that follows Marie Kondo, who actually has had a following before the show started. She published a book, I think, called Spark Joy, and she has like this huge following across the world. People who follow her sort of like mantra of minimalism call themselves converts with a K. So now this is just her way of reaching out to more people. And the show also comes with like nice little tips for like how to fold your clothes for the most maximum storage space, or what to do with your like miscellaneous items and stuff, or that kind of thing. So it's both a good advice show as well as a nice show to like see other people's more worse accommodations. It's not hoarders by any means. Like these people don't live in like, slovenly habits or anything. Like it's just basically mostly ordinary people and teaching them how to get rid of the stuff they don't need.
But it hasn't inspired you to tidy up?
Kind of. I was watching it while drinking, and I was like, I'm going to clean up my dresser, my drawer. And then I just like threw all my clothes on the floor and was like, this is a horrible idea.
It's too much work.
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel, I'm definitely not a hoarder. My place is, I would consider it kind of clean, but I do have a lot of like, I have a lot of t-shirts that I've been holding on to. I'm like, I'm going to lose weight and I'm going to fit back into this t-shirt. So I have like racks of t-shirts I don't use, and I have a lot of books that I'll probably never pick up. I feel like I need to watch the show.
It's good for just like, ordinary people who have just a little too much stuff and like, need to get rid of some of that clutter.
Very cool. And that is on Netflix.
Yes.
Cool. Jacob, what have you been watching?
Oh, I watched the Titan Games, the new athletic competition show hosted by Dwayne Johnson. And Peter, the other question is it better or worse than Netflix's show?
When I was watching the Golden Globes, they had commercials for the show, and I was going to text you. I was like thinking about texting you. I was like, Jacob, you need to see the show. This looks totally down your alley.
Oh, it is. I remember we covered the trailer on the site a little while back, and I think I wrote it up. I was like, yes, this is very much my thing. Because the easy comparison is Ultimate Beastmaster, which is Netflix's athletic competition show. But whereas Ultimate Beastmaster is very international focused, has a very large cast, and has like a lot of people being eliminated per episode as they winnow it down, the Titan Games is very, very focused on only a handful of people, and they actually split it into two competitions, men and women, because it's one of the problems with Beastmaster is that the women can never do as well as the men, and every consistently every single season so far, and like it's been unfair to like watch these incredibly gifted female athletes just not be able to do the things the men could do. So, by splitting it into two competitions, you can cheer on both. You don't have to watch a really powerful woman just lose to a man constantly. It was like that makes Beastmaster upsetting sometimes. Whereas Titan Games is built entirely to be about uplifting as much as possible. And that's Dwayne Johnson's whole persona these days is how can I uplift people? How can I encourage people and inspire people? And he's barely even a host. His whole job of the show is stay at the sidelines with the camera watching him, watching everybody else compete while he says things like, they've got heart. Look at them. They're going to win. I like them. They have, and it's just the show is entirely about very strong people, much stronger than all of us on this show put together, doing these Herculean, insane tasks. Look like they would break my body in 2 seconds. And at the same time, it's incredibly positive. Lots of high-fiving and hugs. Everybody's always smiling. very positive in that way, and I really enjoyed watching it. And the first episode is a two-parter. I watched it on Hulu, where it's streaming right now. It's very, very good. If you enjoy this kind of thing, if you enjoy, triumphant stories of very strong people doing incredibly outrageous things in their bodies to prove that they can please The Rock, then go for it. Titan Games is very fun. I'll be watching it for the rest of the season for sure. I'm just going to run down a few things real quick. I'll talk about Beale Street. I saw Aquaman since I last was on this show, and Aquaman is very good. It is sometimes almost amazing. It never quite reaches the pinnacles I would like it to, but I consider me as pleasantly surprised as anybody that Aquaman is as fun as it is. And watching it, feeling the audience around me, getting into it in a way that I never felt while watching any other DC movie outside of Wonder Woman. It just has that crowd pleasing thing going on. Batman vs Superman, Batman vs Superman actively avoided being crowd pleaser. It actively avoided being fun. It actively avoided giving the audience what they want. Whereas an Aquaman movie is delivering what an audience wants in ways that I don't think anybody saw coming. The fact that it's now the highest grossing DC movie out of all the new ones doesn't surprise me at all, because that movie is a blast. And I saw Spider-Man Into Spider-Verse again. It is still the best superhero movie ever made. And sorry, Aquaman, you may be making more money, but Spider-Verse runs laps around Aquaman in terms of pure filmmaking. It is just an incredible achievement. I can't wait to see it again before it leaves theaters. HT, you saw it again, right?
I did see it again, and it's better even on rewatch. You just catch so many nuances and details. I don't know if I would go so far to say it's the best superhero movie ever made. I still have a soft spot in my heart for Spider-Man 2. But it's so good, and I enjoyed watching it over and over again, and seeing it with my friends who saw it for the first time. So it's great.
Very cool. Still my favorite film of 2018. HE, what else did you watch this week?
So apart from watching Tidying Up on Netflix, I also caught this German series on Netflix called Perfume. And it's really fascinating, sort of Hannibal-esque serial killer thriller about a serial killer who basically cuts out the scent glands of their victims. And it's partially inspired by a novel of the same name by Patrick Suskind, and was also which also spawned the film To Perfume the Story of a Murderer. But this kind of is like a sequel to it, in which it follows this group of elite friends who were obsessed with the serial killer in the original novel, and basically formed a club to experiment with human scents. And then the series cuts between flashbacks to their high school years with this club and to the modern day when the serial killer is rampaging and killing all of these people in very grotesque and very grim ways. So it's great, and I definitely recommend it for people who like and miss Brian Fuller's Hannibal. It has that same sort of macabre, almost slightly campy vibe to it. And I don't want to say campy, but has that same vibe to it. Very stylish. So it's really good. And I think it's only 8 episodes on Netflix.
6 episodes.
6 episodes. Yeah, it's very short. So if you have time and you want to watch a series with subtitles, check it out. What else have I been watching? I have watched Vice. I won't talk too long about this because I think I'm the only one on staff who did not really like this film. I just found it very smug and self-aggrandizing, and I thought that the tonal shifts were more jarring rather than intentional, and it didn't quite work as well for me as The Big Short did with Adam McKay. So did not like Vice. I won't say it's the worst movie of the year like many critics are saying, but I definitely did not connect with this movie quite as well. Christian Bale, though, was good, so I'm not angry about his winning the Golden Globe for that performance. I also saw Shirkers.
When I saw this film, I thought you would enjoy this film, so I'm very curious to hear what you have to say about this one.
Shirkers?
Yeah.
Or Vice? Oh, Shirkers. Oh, I like this film a lot. It's not my favorite documentary of it, but I liked how it was sort of like this puzzle box that kept unraveling. At first, you think it's going to be this ode to filmmaking and about the Singaporean film scene, and then it delves into like this darker mystery of who this former film teacher is, and whenever it delved into him, that was when the film became most fascinating to me. He was kind of like this strange character that reminds me almost in ways of like Tommy Wiseau, and how he himself is like a larger than life character and doesn't feel like a real person. The man at the center of Shirkers, who Sandy Tan is investigating, kind of feels like that, like a larger than life person. So it was intriguing, and I liked it a lot. So and I really want to see the original film that she made, because it looked like a weird avant-garde surreal film that probably would have made some sort of history if it were released or completed. So it was really sad, but I like to see the filmmaking process. But I was more intrigued by like the mystery, I guess, at the center of it.
And Ben also saw this film too.
I did, and I felt largely the same, even down to the Tommy Wiseau comparisons for that guy. Like I mean, I left this movie hating that guy because of what he stole from these girls who were just really, innocently thinking that they could make this movie. And, this was 1992 that they set out to do this. This was 2 years before Clerks. And like, this was a time where I feel like if they were able to complete that movie, it actually would have made a significant impact on maybe even like the international stage. Like there is, it's sort of hard to wrap your mind around now, because there's so much stuff out there and there's so much content, and that it's way easier now for people to just make movies than it was in the early 90s. But like, they had access to everything that they needed at the time. And like she was saying, I feel like it would have been this weird sort of avant-garde thing, but who knows what it could have, the ripple effects that could have come from this. And so it's sort of like heartbreaking to watch and realize like what this guy, he not only stole like a year of these girls' lives or however long it took them to film it, but like, the mental effects, and then also like, what did he potentially take away from the film culture at large? Like there's a lot going on there.
And it is a little frustrating that we don't get all the answers. I don't want to spoil this movie, but I don't think as much as the mystery of this guy and this at the center of this film is compelling. Like, I don't think at the end of the day that's what this movie is about. It's more of, what you guys kind of alluded to in the themes. I really enjoy it. I feel like this is one of those films that many people haven't seen this year that is, in that top 10% of the year. So I would highly recommend people check this out. And another film I feel like a lot of people haven't seen this year that a lot of people are saying is one of the better films this year is another film you saw called Shoplifters.
Yes. So Shoplifters, I've raved about before. I won't talk about too much, but this is the film that I saw right before I finalized my top 10 list, and it shot right to the top. It's so affecting. It's so emotional. It's so intimate. And it's just so deeply human that I could not walk away from it without just like being shaken to my core and being utterly devastated by this film, while still maintaining a degree of hope, because it is still a very optimistic movie in a sense. So I highly recommend that you guys all see it. I know I'm the only one who watched it, but I'm just going to keep tooting this horn. I can't watch a trailer for this movie without just like bursting into tears. So please,
where can people see this movie? Because like that's my problem is I can't find it anywhere.
It's honestly, actually, I think it's almost out of theaters in New York too, because it was in like a few select theaters that I managed to see it at. But I think it's probably on its way out, which is unfortunate because I think it's the best movie of the year, and I'm sure like many people think it's one of the best if they ended up being able to see it.
Yeah. One of the best films of a few years ago is something else you saw called It Follows.
Yeah, I was watching this because my roommate wanted to show it to me, and we were having just a rather chill night. And we watched It Follows, which I had never seen before, but now I was like, I'm a horror fan now, I guess. So I was like, oh, I'll check it out now. And I liked it. I think in the sense it was more style than substance, and I felt like a lot of the hype going into it kind of tempered my expectations in a way, because I was expecting something that was really revolutionary and different, and I think because we've had so much good horror recently, especially the high concept horror recently, that I was expecting to do something a bit more with this. And while I liked the atmosphere and the dread that permeated throughout this film, I did feel like it was quite stylish in a way that kind of forgave some of its lack of substance.
I do think there's more substance than, I don't know. I feel like I would go on a adventure through some writing about this movie, because I feel like, and I'm not saying the obvious analogy of this movie, that I think there are other things in this movie that might not be immediately clear that I think add to the depth of this film. But I don't want to talk about that here. So, you also rewatched one of the Harry Potter films?
Yes. So the Film Society Lincoln Theater is currently doing an Alfonso Cuarón retrospective in honor of Roma. And one of the first films they did was Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, which they showed in 35 millimeter, which I'd never seen before. So I went to see it there, and it was a lot of fun. And I actually haven't revisited this film in its entirety in a while, and it's so fun to see, just especially the scenes of all the adult actors thinking just how dramatic they can make every scene. They're just chewing the scenery to the utmost extent, and especially what I think is the best scene of the entire series is when they put Alan Rickman and Gary Oldman and David Thewlis in a room together, and they're just doing like their own version of Shakespeare while Daniel Radcliffe and everyone else just watches. And I think that's just a great fun scene. And Cuarón too. It was interesting seeing this like post Roma and watching how he loves to play with foreground and background and his deep focus here. He really enjoys his crowded frames, and it's fun to see that even in like a supposedly like children's movie. He's just like, even back then he was flexing his directorial muscles, I felt like. Also it's interesting too that like even when we see like the magic of Harry Potter, the world of Harry Potter in the first two movies, this one felt like it had the most color to the magic. It felt like something that was both lived in and also was very just enchanting in a way that it hadn't before. So Prisoner of Azkaban is still a great movie, and it was great to watch it again and confirm that.
Yeah, it's the best of that series in my opinion, and I think Cuarón just brings, I mean, everything you said. I'm not going to make this podcast longer, but I just love that movie, and I want to revisit it soon, actually. I want to revisit that whole franchise, but I'm afraid to rewatch those first two movies because they're not.
The first one
great.
is good. The second one is a real slog.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to Ben. Aside from Shirkers, what have you been watching?
I caught up with Forbidden Planet, which is a movie that I have been sort of dancing around for a long time. It came out in 1956. It's a big budget sci-fi movie from the 50s. It's sort of like considered a classic by a lot of people. It's basically a riff on Shakespeare's The Tempest, but in sci-fi form. And I think, I don't know, I came across this movie first just by seeing like incredible artwork and posters and stuff for it, just randomly online. And it's been in the back of my mind for a long time, but it finally came on TCM and I DVR'd it and finally got a chance to check it out. It stars Leslie Nielsen in, I think, his debut movie role, or certainly one of his early roles. And he is like playing like a straight like sci-fi action hero kind of guy. So as somebody who's only seen Leslie Nielsen in his later comedic works, this was an interesting time capsule for me to go back and see him deliver a pretty solid performance as just like a straight ahead, no nonsense ship captain. The movie is about a group of astronauts who land on a mysterious planet, and they're basically going after a previous expedition that had been sent out to that same area. And it's all about what they learn there, what they discover. And it's a pretty basic plot, but the production design is really insane for the time. Like I said, this movie came out in 1956. There's this really, really cool monster in the film that was created by a Disney animator who was hired by MGM, I think, MGM was the production company that made this movie, and MGM sort of like bought out this Disney animator from his contractor, hired them briefly just to design this one monster in this movie. So that's like a big standout thing for me. And just in general, the whole thing really felt like a really cool movie for the time, and like a precursor to a lot of the stuff that we'd see on Star Trek like 10 years later. So if you've not seen this and you're a sci-fi fan, I would recommend checking out Forbidden Planet, because it seems to be, like I said, sort of a precursor to a lot of stuff that that is iconic in that genre in terms of imagery and style and things like that.
This is my go-to put on in the background on mute at parties movie, Ben. I put this on because people are always drawn to it. They without sound, just the imagery, the colors, the animated monster, all the retro aesthetics, especially in high def. Like people will be at a party and they'll slowly start turning toward the TV every single time. It's astounding.
I can totally see how that would work, and especially like the ray guns, the laser guns that they have are like, it's just so kind of funny to watch what, one of the early examples of that technology, and how people like don't react at all when they're firing their fake guns. There's no blowback, there's no nothing, and like even the blasts that come forth from them feel like really weak and kind of puny compared to like stuff like Star Wars and things that we're used to seeing. But there's a lot of it's a good movie, and it's like an archaeological interest, I think, for Forbidden Planet. So check that out. I also rewatched The Big Sleep for probably the 10th time, which is one of my favorite movies. It's from the mid 40s, and it stars Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. It's like one of the most famous film noir films ever made, and my wife had never seen it, and I just wanted to show it to her because I've loved it for a long time. And this to me is like maybe the peak of the film noir genre. It's like the murder mystery story that is at the center of this thing is really, really difficult, almost impossible to figure out. It's I think when I was scrolling through Wikipedia earlier, it said something about the plot being famously convoluted, to the point where even the guy who wrote the book on which this movie was based, Raymond Chandler, didn't know the answer to a question that the filmmakers had when they were reaching out to him and trying to put all these pieces together and draw their, put their yarn on the wall from point A to point B. But like none of that really matters. It's more about the mood and the atmosphere and the rat-a-tat dialogue and the incredible performances from Bogart and Bacall and the chemistry that they have on screen. It's really like, it just lights the whole thing up. So I would definitely check this one out if you have not seen The Big Sleep. And then finally, I think the only other thing. I watched. I'm rewatching Arrested Development and Community at the same time right now. I showed my parents the first episode of Arrested Development when I was visiting them in Florida, and sort of hopefully got them hooked on that. We watched the first like 5 episodes when I was back there with them. And then my wife and I just continued on instead of, it's hard when you watch that many episodes of a comedy that's that good. It's hard to just, cut ties immediately. And we've seen it already a couple times through. But man, those first 3 seasons of Arrested Development are just like the definition of comedy classic to me. And the same with Community. Like the early seasons of that show are just so great. The only other movie that I watched is something that I know Brad has seen as well. And it's Bird Box, the new Netflix movie. I watched that this morning. And it's fine, I think. I felt like it was it's competently made, but it reminded me of like The Happening mixed with The Village. So there's like a lot of M. Night Shyamalan going on in there for some reason, even though the movie itself doesn't necessarily have that feel, but it's more of like the mysterious creatures that are haunting Sandra Bullock and her family, and the idea of the characters being blind and sort of wandering through an unfamiliar environment. It just sort of had those Shyamalan vibes for me, and really it just made me want to rewatch The Village again, because that movie rules and Bird Box does not rule. It's just fine. But I'm interested to hear what you thought about it, Brad.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same level. I enjoyed it while watching it, and I think that there's some really haunting, visceral moments in it, but it also feels kind of like Diet, A Quiet Place, just with a different, version of the sense that they, with sight instead of sound. So it's, and I don't know, for me, without spoiling anything, the ending just felt a little too abrupt and kind of, I don't know, light for my taste. Like, it's just like, there was one part when you realize like where they're at and everything, where I kind of just rolled my eyes. I'm just like, oh, of course. So like it's pretty good. The performances are solid. There's a good ensemble cast here, but it feels like Netflix really trying to make their version of A Quiet Place. And so I didn't love it as much as A Quiet Place, but I still had a good time watching it.
Brad, you also watched Vice this week.
I did, and almost on the complete opposite end of HT, I really loved this movie. I've always liked Adam McKay as not just a filmmaker but a comedian. He used to write for Saturday Night Live, and so like I have this immense amount of respect for him, especially jumping from doing the kind of comedy he used to do to Vice. And I love this movie. I love that his satirical approach to the monster that is Dick Cheney. I understand on some level the idea of McKay's approach to this movie, especially when it comes to his credit scene and the criticism that he's lobbying towards the American public as far as not paying attention and, paying more attention to distractions, being hypocritical since he has made movies like Anchorman and Talladega Nights, which are the same kind of distractions he seems to be criticizing for taking us away from, paying attention to important issues in politics. But I also feel like him making those movies doesn't preclude him from criticizing the fact that people don't do both. Like it's possible to appreciate the kind of pop culture art that Adam McKay has done and other, entertainment, and also still pay close attention to what's going on in politics and doing that. And I think that there are far too many people who don't do that. And so I think to say that what he's doing is hypocritical isn't entirely fair, because I'm sure he's a very smart guy, and I'm sure he's self-aware of what he's doing, because he's made some very silly, comedies, especially when it comes to things that they did, on Funny or Die and stuff like that. So I don't think that the kind of movies he's made before preclude him from making that kind of criticism of society and their approach to politics and the things that we let the Bush administration and Dick Cheney get away with. But Vice is just it's just this great criticism of Dick Cheney and just how desperate he was to prove himself and to use the power of the government to do what he felt was right. And it shows like the kind of terrible things that can happen when we don't pay attention to what's going on, behind the scenes of our government, and don't and let fear or things like that, get the better of us. I just thought it was a fantastic movie that came at a perfect time.
I love just how deeply unbalanced the movie is, and how it's just from one point, like strong point of view. And I wish there was more movies like that from both sides. Actually, I really enjoyed that.
Absolutely.
What else have you been watching this week?
So I kicked off New Year's with I believe what was the first thing to hit Netflix for 2019, which was Taylor Swift's Reputation Stadium Tour documentary. I'm not ashamed to admit that I like Taylor Swift. She is good at crafting catchy pop tunes, and I enjoy her music. And I was interested to see what the concert was like, because every now and then I've considered, maybe it would be cool to see a Taylor Swift concert, because it looks like she puts on a hell of a show. But being stuck in a huge stadium with a whole bunch of screaming fans and stuff around doesn't sound like the best thing for me, especially when I've heard that those tickets were through the roof when it comes to the price. So this was a cool way to experience her concert. I was a little disappointed because it's not the kind of concert documentary that really goes behind the scenes or shows more of like how she operates and that kind of thing. It is purely just the concert that you're watching. And I would have preferred a little bit more diving into just, her production and development and creating the concert mixed with the footage of her actually performing and that kind of thing. But it was still really cool to see just the scale of this show, and it really just puts you in perspective just how crazy it is that somebody like that, is just in the middle of a stadium with thousands of people watching them, and they're specifically there for her. It's really kind of awe-inspiring. And I also took the time to see Holmes and Watson.
Why?
I had to see this movie for myself. I love Step Brothers. I love Talladega Nights. I love Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly together. And like the buzz about this movie was so bad, and I kept hearing stories of people walking out that I was like, I have to see how bad this is. And this movie is just, it's not good. It is so unfunny. And I don't even know how this movie like got past focus group screenings or anything like that, because I laughed maybe a total of 6 times, and they weren't even hearty laughs. They were just like, huh, that's kind of funny. It is just a huge swing and a miss. Like I don't know like what they were thinking with this movie. Like they should have just scrapped it entirely, just because it's a complete waste of everybody who's in it. I don't know how Eitan Cohen, who was responsible for writing Tropic Thunder, one of the best comedies of that decade, made this movie, because it is wretched. It's one of the worst comedies I've ever seen. It's just a complete disaster.
I have just no interest in seeing this movie. Just no interest.
Don't. I did this for you, Peter.
What else have you seen this week, Brad?
I did a lot of catch up so that I could properly complete my top 10, which is out on Slash Film if you want to go check it out. I got around to seeing The Favorite, which obviously everybody has been praising left and right, and it is fantastic. It does something different with the period setting that you normally don't see. It's this dark, twisted comedy that has fantastic performances from Olivia Colman, Emma Stone, and Rachel Weisz. It's delightfully catty in the same way that A Simple Favor was, but also in a much different way, because it's much more vicious and darker, and it's just I really just liked it. It's so funny too. There's so many great laugh out loud moments in this movie that you don't expect. Particularly, I love how intermittently everyone is just rude to this young servant boy for no reason at all. They just like you've probably seen the scene now where Olivia Colman as Queen Anne just walks by him and stops and looks at him, and she's like, "Did you just look at me?" It's like, "What are you doing? Look at me, and she just screams at him, and everyone else just treats him like crap for no reason. He does nothing the entire movie, and they just constantly yell at him, and I love that recurring gag throughout the movie.
And you also have some other stuff you've seen?
Yeah, and I finally got around to seeing Roma, which, as I talked about before, I loved. It was the number 2 on my top 10 list. It's just such an amazing piece of filmmaking. Alfonso Cuarón wrote, produced, directed, edited, and shot this movie. And the way he moves the camera through this film is so elegant and simple. It's just it's as simple as just moving a camera from left to right across these sets that feel like they weren't built, that you can't even imagine a crew being on these sets. It just feels like it's Alfonso Cuarón sitting in the middle of a house with a camera and just moving it around. There are incredible shots in here, and there are sequences that are amazing that he pulled off too from the middle of the movie, where without spoiling anything, when the main character goes and shops for a crib for her baby, and then all of a sudden there's a protest outside from student protesters protesting the government, and just the way he goes from these quiet scenes to something on a much larger scale happening outside nearby, and bridging these things together. It's just perfect filmmaking. He is a master behind the camera. He knows how to tell a story. He injects himself into a lot of this. He pulled from his experience with Mexico City and growing up there, and it's just so powerful and so personal, and I loved it so much.
Yeah, I really love the cinematography of that movie. You did mention this film when I brought up my criticisms of Beale Street earlier, and I do think the criticisms, especially in the first half of Roma, is very valid. Like, it is very much like a mood piece. In the second half, I feel like the narrative kind of kicks in. I will say this, if you haven't listened to the Slash Filmcast review of Roma, I would highly recommend it for both sides, because I think Britt Hayes, who often writes for the site, she had a wonderful negative reaction to the film that made me kind of reassess my feelings on the movie. Not that it made me dislike the movie in any way, but I love when someone can come up with a insightful point of view that challenges the way you think about films, and that's what I think great criticism can do. So check that out. That's on Slash Filmcast. Let's move on to what we've been eating. I'll start things off. I've been talking a lot about being on the keto diet, which means eating less than 20 carbs per day, and things I've been finding because I think people find I not just think, I get emails and tweets and stuff, people telling me they're finding some of these recommendations helpful for their lives, even if they're not on keto. If you're, just want to eat less sugar, there's a company called Cereal School, which I ordered some of their cereal. They have a cinnamon bun cereal and almost like Fruit Loops like cereal. Their Fruit Loops is sold out. I guess they kickstarted this, and they produced enough and sold out within like months of their production of like the cereal, because it's just like everybody loves it. It comes in these like little bags, and it's 5 grams of carbohydrates per bag, and it's only like 70 calories, 8 grams of protein. So if you love cereal and don't like sugar, I would highly recommend Cereal School. The Quest chips, there's a chili lime flavor that's new, and I'm a person that used to be like, whenever there's a party, I love those hint of lime flavored like Tostitos chips, and obviously on a low carb diet, I can't have chips. This fills the urge so much. These little bags are like 140 calories, 3 net carbs, 20 grams of protein. So, way better for you. So, I don't know. I think it's something you could check out, and I recommend it to someone who might not even be on the keto diet. I think like those two things are, maybe you're going to be paying a little bit more money, because anything that is, diet food, you're paying more money, but it seems like the ingredients and the nutritional information on these things are just way better than the alternatives that you buy, at the grocery store. So I recommend them. But let's go from one side of the coin to the complete other and go to Brad's Food Corner and find out what Brad has been eating this week.
So Peter was talking about this healthy new cereal, and I just went to the complete opposite end of the spectrum and probably got some of the unhealthiest cereals you can find out there. It's going to sound weird to say this, but it is a great time to be like a cereal lover. There are so many new cereals that have come out over the past month and a half, and I've stocked up on a lot of them so I can try them and talk about them on the show here. And so that'll be coming in future episodes of the Water Cooler Daily as I make my way through them. But I will talk about 2 that I was able to get my hands on and try already. One of them is kind of a throwback, because people might remember sometime in the 90s, there was a Pop-Tart cereal that was out. And it was around for a little bit, and then it disappeared. And it's one of those things where like you see pop up online every now and then and be like, hey, you guys remember when this was around? And everyone's like, oh, yeah, I missed that. Well, it's back. There are 2 new Pop-Tart cereals. There's one for the frosted strawberry Pop-Tarts and one for the brown sugar cinnamon Pop-Tarts. I haven't tried the brown sugar cinnamon one yet, but I did go out of my way to try the strawberry frosted Pop-Tarts one, and it's really good. I don't quite remember what the old one tasted like, 'cause it's been so long, but this one is really good. It's even got the filling inside, the strawberry jam filling is particularly good, and with the milk and the frosting on it. And so if you can find that, it's pretty much everywhere. I picked up mine at Walmart like a week or so ago. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, in the very bad cereal category, there's a Sour Patch Kids cereal out there. I'm
so disappointed to hear this, because I'm such a big fan of Sour Patch Kids, and I sent this to you when I found it online, and I was like, Brad, you got to try this.
Yes, and so I was able to pick it up at Walmart, and it is such a weird flavor. Like there's a little bit of like the sour, dust whatever on the cereal, and I tried it dry first to see what that was like, and it was fine, but it's not nearly as okay in the milk. It's just this weird amalgamation of slightly sour taste from the candy with a cereal that tastes vaguely like Trix, but like generic worse Trix. And the milk does not do it any favors whatsoever. It was not pleasing to my mouth. I was really just disappointed in it, where I had a few spoonfuls and I was just like, ugh, this was a mistake. So I left the box at my friend Charlie's house so that his kids could have it.
So disappointing.
Okay. And then there's also on the Pop-Tarts thing, Pop-Tarts also released these new bite-sized things called Pop-Tarts Bits that are basically like they're the size of like shredded mini wheats, but they're a little bit softer. and they still have strawberry filling inside them. And there's also a brown sugar cinnamon style one of those too, and those are really good as well.
These seems like things that you're not supposed to snack on, that people are going to like eat the whole like bag or whatever they come in and like eat like, 5,000 calories.
No, I mean, they come in like little
baggies.
Little tiny baggies like a lot of snacks do.
Yeah, no, I like that. Also, the cereal skull thing that I mentioned. I'll link both of the things I mentioned in the show notes. That comes in those little baggies, which I love when stuff does that, because if you leave me alone with a box of cereal, I'll just pour. I think like the recommended servings like 3/4 of a cup of cereal, and I'll probably have like 2 cups of cereal in there, and then put some milk. So I'm eating like most Americans. I'm probably eating way more than the recommended, meal. But let's move on to what we've been playing. This past week, I was celebrating my friend John's birthday, and I went to 2 escape rooms, which were a lot of fun. One of them sucked. It was kind of like Galaxy Quest. It was a theme, which should have been good, but it wasn't. The one I want to mention is Lab Rat at Hatch Escape Rooms. It's their only escape room. It was probably the best escape room I've done, and I've probably done 5 or 6 at this point, so not like a whole lot, but if you're in Los Angeles, I'd recommend you check out Lab Rat at Hatch Escape Rooms. And after that first birthday, we went to 2-Bit Circus, which is in downtown Los Angeles. This is a new entertainment complex that has popped up. It's from the son of Nolan Bushnell, who was the creator of Atari and Chuck E. Cheese. And what this is kind of like an arcade for adults. So it's not a barcade, so it doesn't have like a ton of retro games. It does have a bar, it does have food, which was questionably okay. They have tots and stuff like that. But what is cool about this place is they kind of have like this midway with all these games that I think are custom made for this, which I can't even describe to you, but like they're very... they're games that like get you physically involved, yet they're, a digital video game. And in addition to that, they have escape rooms, they have a VR maze, they have a whole line of virtual reality experiences. They probably the best one that I saw Kitra did was this one where you actually get on this custom made device that has wings, and basically the wings controller, it moves you around, and there's like a fan in your face, and it gives you the sensation that you are flying in the age of dinosaurs. And it looked like a lot of fun, but I did not do it. Kitra loved it. But I would recommend checking this out if you're in Los Angeles and looking for something to do. 2-Bit Circus is great. The only criticism I would give is it is taking the old arcade model that you have to pay, put money on a card, kind of like Dave & Buster's, and each game has its own value to play it. I feel like this would work much better if it was like, I pay for a card by the hour. So I pay for this card for 3 hours and I get to play as much things as I want. I feel like there was not many people in there. It was a weekday, and I feel like they would get so many more people in there, sell so much more food, make so much more money if they could, put it down to the actual, a time allotment, which I do hear they do on some nights. But anyways, in addition to that, I played a new game called Keyforge. This is from Fantasy Flight, and the designer of Magic the Gathering, Jacob, the name is escaping me. Do you know?
Oh, goodness. Ask me any other day, any other week, I'll be able to tell you.
Richard Garfield?
Yes, Richard Garfield.
Richard Garfield. I've never gotten into Magic. Magic the Gathering is this deck game where you play, you build your own deck of cards, you buy packs, you eventually take the best cards from those packs to build into your strategy to play against other people with these decks. It's very costly, time consuming. It requires a lot of knowing what cards are in the sets and meta, and it's not something that's that much fun for me. This new game from Fantasy Flight Games is interesting because it is a card game, much in the sense of Magic the Gathering, where it's a 2-player game, you play against other people, but this is a game that could have only been made right now. Like it couldn't have been made years ago. And what I mean by that is that when you buy a deck, you don't buy a pack, you buy a deck to play this game, and it's like I bought them at Barnes & Noble, so they were $10 a deck. And when you buy a deck, your deck is a unique deck. So say 1 million people buy decks, every single one of those 1 million people will have a different deck of cards. And you can't combine the cards because the card back actually has, the name of your deck and the look of your deck. So it's everybody has a unique deck that's unique to them. And I played it with my friend Jeff, and we had 4 decks, and it varied. The balance of the game varied, but it was fun to kind of open up a pack, or open up a deck and actually discover what your deck is, and kind of try to figure out what the advantage or what kind of strategy you're supposed to take with that deck. And it's all generated by an algorithm and like these printers that, obviously couldn't have existed years ago. And it's a lot of fun. I do think there is some balance issues, but if you're willing to go along for that ride and try to, find a deck that you like, it's a lot of fun, and I highly recommend it. It's called Keyforge, and you can find it on at Barnes & Noble's, Amazon. I think the base set is sold out and selling for insane prices on Amazon, but you can still get the decks separately at those places, and you can just kind of like use pennies or something to count the gem. You use a thing to count for what the tokens that you were supposed to have. It's very easy to do. Jacob, have you played this yet?
No, I decided to sit Keyforge out. Interestingly, I was also never a big Magic player because it's a very expensive hobby, but I was a big fan of other deck building card-based games, and the whole fun for me was building the deck, like going through and like finding your weaknesses, finding your strengths, and trying to hone the best deck possible for your next game. So that being done for me kind of strips away the appeal. So I get why you would enjoy it and why other people will enjoy it, but not for me.
To me, it's all about the discovery. Like, I don't even look at the cards. We just shuffle and we just start playing, and it's just like, what do I have? What do I have to, what do I have to deal with? Let's move on to Chris. Chris, what have you been playing?
I don't usually partake in this segment, but for Christmas, my wife bought me this board game called Bob Ross: The Art of the Chill game, and on every year on New Year's Eve, we were very low key. We just get together with another couple, and we usually just hang out and have dinner and play board games. So we played this on New Year's Eve, and the instructions were ridiculously complicated. So much so that when we started it, I was like, "Oh man, this is going to be a bust." But once we figured out how to play, it was actually a lot of fun. Basically, the object of the game is you have to finish painting a picture before Bob Ross does, and you're not actually really painting. You're using like cards that say, the colors, like, alizarin crimson and all those colors he used to use, and you have to get them down before the metaphorical Bob Ross gets them first. And it's silly and very low stakes, and it was a lot of fun. And so yeah, if you're out there looking for something ridiculous to play, look up Bob Ross: The Art of the Chill. Actually, it's The Art of Chill game.
Yeah, I think that game's available at Target. Jacob, what have you been playing?
Oh, this comes after the holiday season where I break out a lot of board games constantly, so I'll only hit the highlights. First, I want to talk about Azul: Stained Glass of Sintra. I previously talked about Azul on this podcast before, which is the previous game from the same designer. And Azul was a very unlikely hit last year. It was a huge bestseller, critical darling. Everybody who played board games seriously bought and played Azul. And it was a game about designing mosaic tiles, which sounds really boring. But the fun was that it was a really devious game of resource management and making the right calls and trying to screw people over when they're trying to buy the right tiles. And the sequel, The Stained Glass of Sintra, uses the same central market approach. You still buy your supplies in the same way you buy your supplies in Azul, but instead of building mosaic tiles, you're building stained glass windows. So once you get your supplies, it's a very different game. It's a little more complex. People didn't take to it as quickly with regular Azul. I can teach Azul in 5 minutes, and people are immediately having fun. Whereas it took maybe 15, 20 minutes for people playing Azul: Stained Glass of Sintra to really grasp it and to really have a good time with it. After 3 or 4 games, the people who I was playing with thought it was as good as regular Azul. So it's very fun. I'm going to play regular Azul first, then go buy Azul: Stained Glass of Sintra. I also played Railroad Inc. which is a game like if you buy it's only a $20 game, or maybe $15. It's very cheap. And there's also 2 sets, a blue and an orange pack. You buy both of them, you can have 12 people playing at once. So it's already worth it. And you use a dry erase-esque material board and a dry erase marker. And what happens is somebody rolls a dice in the middle of the table and tell you what kind of railroad tracks you have available to you for that turn. Your job is to use what's available to you in those dice to try to connect the routes on your board. And what's fun is that everybody starts exactly the same. No boards are different. Everybody gets the exact same dice rolls. The question is, how are people going to utilize what's given them in the most efficient, strong ways? So it's really hilarious by the end of the game to see like someone next to you use the same information as you to build these beautiful railways, like they can connect everywhere and function perfectly while yours is a total disaster. So it's really fun. It's really fast, and it's just all about taking the same raw materials and trying to build something good, and seeing how everybody takes some different directions. Lots of fun. It was a big hit with my family. And Pitch Storm. This is the latest in the party game, humor category. I've talked before about how I'm not a big Cards Against Humanity fan because that game sort of creates the jokes for you. I prefer games that give you the materials to create your own jokes, and Pitch Storm very much falls into that. You get a hand of cards where it's set up either a group of characters or the plot of a movie, and then one person plays a studio executive, and they listen to everybody else at the table, and the person has to then draw either a character or a plot based on what they didn't draw, and they must randomly combine it with what's in their hand and try to pitch a movie to the studio executive. So let's say in your hand you have a card that says a group of rebellious college students. Then you draw a card that says must escape from a dinosaur island. You must then try to pitch that movie to the executive. And you get some really outrageous, bizarre combinations. Like so that shouldn't work. You have to try to like pitch it as best you can. But at some point, the studio executive can pause their pitch and throw a wild card in the mix. Say, okay, I really like your pitch. But why can't it also be about a robot uprising? And give them a card that says must involve robot uprising, or give them a card that says okay, this sounds good, but it sounds like it should be a trilogy, and what you're describing is part 3. Which part 1? So so the executive's allowed to go in there and mess with their pitch, and it's just about trying to first of all come up with a coherent pitch based on these random cards, and then take the studio executive's terrible notes and make it work in your story as well. So if you're a movie fan that already has that strong hook of trying to come up with a good movie, and if you like improv comedy or like being silly or just trying to think on your feet, it's a really, really fun game. That's Pitch Storm.
That sounds awesome. How many players is that?
I think the base game is 5 or 6, but you can easily hack it to play as many as you want, honestly.
Sweet.
It's only like $20. It's really fun.
I assume it's like one of those party games that the points don't really matter. It's just like having fun, right?
Oh yeah, the points don't matter at all. And interestingly, it comes with a coupon for not Final Cut Pro. What's the name of the screenwriting software I'm blanking on right now, guys?
Final Draft.
Final Draft. Thank you. It comes with a coupon for Final Draft. At least my copy did, to get like a percentage off of a copy of Final Draft. Which was so if you're a filmmaker and want a good card game and want a coupon for Final Draft, it's a good purchase. Get the new edition of Camel Up. Camel Up is one of the best board games ever made. It is incredibly simple, where random dice rolls determine the standings in a camel race, and your job is to try to bet on the winners of the camel race. It's very, very simple, but I've seen it entertain families. I've seen it entertain drunken adults. I've seen it have people screaming and shouting and pounding the table and cheering and like moaning at their losses. And the new edition has brand new art. It has more durable components, and it's just so much fun. Like if it's the only game I can bring home for the holidays, and every single person, from my mom, my brother and his sister, all my in-laws, everybody will play Camel Up. Everybody will enjoy Camel Up. And the new edition is just a really beautiful thing. Previously, I kind of had to apologize for the first edition because the art is so ugly. In this one, everybody just immediately oohs and ahs at it.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite games of all time. I don't have the new edition, but I highly recommend anybody check this out. I think it won the Spiel du Jour, which is kind of like the I guess, Oscars of board games?
Yeah, it's close enough. Yeah, it's very close. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it has a lot of randomness, which normally I would hate, but it's just like a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, because if the randomness was directly affecting you, that's a problem. But the randomness is affecting the camels you're betting on. So your job is to try to predict the randomness, and that's what makes Camel Up such a scream, the play.
Yeah.
As I mentioned in the last water cooler I was on, I started playing the RPG Scum and Villainy, which is a hack of the Blades in the Dark system, which is my favorite RPG of all time. This one is essentially build a spaceship, build a crew, go commit space crimes. And I played 2 sessions with my family so far, and it seems to be going very well. People seem to be really enjoying it. They play as a group of thieves known as the Healers. They made this all up, who pose as a hospital ship so they can get like where they need to go, dressed as doctors, and they steal things. And so far, they've stuck on board a spaceship that was hosting a birthday party for a former like galactic hero, so they could steal from his personal museum. They had to go raid a compound being taken over by a group of criminals, and it ended up getting no money because it pissed off both sides in the end. Pretty much, the game is built to increase character stress, put them in bad situations, make them make poor decisions. So right now, they're flying this hunk of junk, wanted by the police, with running out of money, and everybody's having a great time because it's all about putting these characters in these, pretty much you're not going to be Jean-Luc Picard or Captain Kirk. You're going to be Han Solo and a busted-ass ship, barely getting by, struggling. That's what Scum and Villainy is all about. And everybody is. It's so much fun. It's not as like simple as the simplest RPGs, but I think it's more accessible than like maybe than D&D is. So if you have somebody who's willing to learn it, Scum and Villainy or Blades in the Dark, which is the fantasy version of this, are both excellent. And I finally broke down a wall I thought I'd never break down, which is when I decided to start focusing on my weight loss. I said, okay, I'm going to need a hobby. I need something I can focus on, something that can require extreme attention to detail and extremely time-consuming, so that I can, not worry about food, not worry about eating bullshit snacks. And I decided what to do after going home for Christmas and found that my brother, my brother-in-law, and my sister-in-law have all gotten into the Warhammer 40K. And for those of you who don't know what Warhammer is, it is one of the old school miniature tabletop games where you buy a set for an army, and they're not cheap, and they're all come in little plastic pieces. You have to snip them out. You have to carefully assemble them with glue. You have to hand paint them. You have to roll 50 dice to make your turns. You have to, if you want to play it right, you need to like create,
it's a lifestyle. It's not.
It
just
is a lifestyle. It is. And luckily, my family's doing it. I have some friends who, when I said I was doing it, caved it. Oh my god, I've been waiting for somebody to do it so I can try it. So a few friends who are buying armies now. So we're all learning how to paint. We're all learning how to assemble models. We're all going to start building terrain. And in a month or two, when we've all got our stuff together, we're going to try actually playing the game. So on my Instagram page, I'll be sharing images of my attempts to paint over the coming weeks. So you can look for that there. And finally, I'm going to tease the fact that...
By the way, Jacob, all you need to do is learn to get a good wash. If you can get a good wash, like that is, I forget what they call it, but it's like instant talent. It makes everything look good.
Yeah, I'm going to go meet up with my brother this weekend. I'm going to San Antonio. We're going to spend the day, trading painting tips. He's done a lot more than I have already, and we're going to hopefully get good at it. So I can actually, because Warhammer is very, very silly, especially 40K. It's pretty much what if orcs and elves, but in outer space, with giant swords and spaceships and extremely things that were really, really cool to 14-year-old boys that are somehow still cool if you learn to embrace it. So we'll look for pictures of that and updates on this in the coming weeks. And finally, I'm also going to tease this. My RPG friends have asked me to put together a campaign of Fantasy Flight Games' really complex, really good Star Wars RPG. So we're already planning that for a couple of weeks ahead. So I'll soon have some Star Wars adventures cooked up to share with you guys.
Very cool. And Ben, you've been playing some stuff too.
I have. Really only Red Dead Redemption 2, which my friend got me for Christmas. And man, this game, I'm only, I don't know, like a few hours in. From what I've heard from Jacob talking about it and reading a little bit about it online, like at a certain point, relatively early on, the game sort of opens up into a massive version of the world. I'm not there yet. I'm still... things are still relatively contained, but I've sort of been taking Jacob's advice and just like taking it slow and like looting every body that I come across and not worrying when all of the other game's characters are yelling at me to hurry up and, and do certain things. I'm just like ignoring them and wandering around and sort of taking in the breathtaking imagery of the Old West. And it's a lot of fun so far. I am very interested to see how long I'm going to be able to sustain this as a player, because that's normally not my pace in video games. I'm very much like a run and gun kind of, I like to really get in there and like mess around and cause a lot of chaos. But I'm trying to, take it down a notch, I guess, for Red Dead Redemption 2. But Jacob, what's your latest update in terms of your playing through that game right now?
I fell off during the holidays. I started as I was traveling. It was much easier for me to bring my Switch and play, far more bite-sized, 4 or 5 hour games as opposed to a 70-hour game that required me to be at home. I still like it a lot. I need to get back into it. What frustrated me at the start still frustrates me, but it's like in terms of you don't see video games this ambitious ever. I mean, outside of maybe Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild 2 years ago, I can't remember a game that felt as fully realized. And its flaws are ones that I think make it interesting to talk about. So, come back to me in a few more months when I've hopefully finished it. But I think it's just a fascinating swing for the fences that mostly connects.
Yeah, I'm excited to dig into it further, and maybe I'll go play it on my lunch break right now since we're done recording this podcast after 2 hours.
Yeah, this might be the longest episode of Slash Film Daily ever. So let's end it here. We have a lot of episodes coming out this week that are going to be features. We have some Captain Marvel interviews from the Captain Marvel set tomorrow. We'll have the editor's top 10 movies of the year. We'll finish our movie moments discussion, which I've gotten a bunch of emails and tweets about. I'll talk about that then. You can find more of all of our work at slashfilm.com. You can find this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns, or life advice from Chris to peter@slashfilm.com. That's peter@slashfilm.com. And please go rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends. Spread the word. We'll see you tomorrow.
Hey, Peter. You can't quit yet.
Okay.
It's been a few weeks.
By the way, we've gone so long in this podcast that there's a 2% battery on my laptop.
Oh, well, is that enough percentage for some beautiful truths?
Let's try it. Let's go for it.
All right. I've opened up the gargantuan book of insult, offense, and effrontery. I'm going to go quickly. I've opened up randomly to the failures section, which describes us all. For example, Peter. He's selling furniture for a living. His own. HT. I hear you laughing. You shouldn't laugh because there's a lot less to you than meets the eye.
That's true because I'm short.
Well, Ben, he hatches a lot of ideas. The trouble is he doesn't hitch them.
Okay.
Brad, his boss, keeps telling him, your salary raise will become effective as soon as you do.
I mean, that's just not fair.
And Chris, he can't tell the difference between working up steam and generating a fog.
All right.